Thanks, everyone, for joining us for our final pod of 2024. Only 1 week left until the playoffs. Of course, we got to start with the 2024 Vikings, quickly becoming maybe my favorite sports team of all time. It's the You Like That Feels Great Baby podcast. Joey is out this week. He's on assignment, and I guess that assignment is repairing a leaky roof. So, he's out this week. Has nothing to do with the fact that the Niners are out of the playoffs. He has an important assignment. So I'll just be doing this one solo. I'll try to keep this one brief, but get you prepared for what might be the biggest regular season NFL game of all time next week between the Vikings and Lions, both teams at 14-3. Let's start with a Week 17 review before we get into Week 18. For the Vikings, at home against the Packers, 27-25 victory. An unreal game, an unreal season that you just feel the magic in the air. The post-game locker room celebration with the entire team kind of led by Jonathan Grenard, all waiting for Darnold to complete his interview with Tom Brady and come back into the locker room. They douse him. They carry him. It's like you see Kevin O'Connell in the corner of the locker room just shaking his head like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe what I've created. And it's like Vikings fans are really, really honestly starting to believe that we can win the Super Bowl this year. It's always been like a thought, but it's never been like a, hey, we might actually win it. And for the first time all season, after that game, after that locker room celebration, and just after a quick look around the league, it really does feel like the Vikings have a serious shot here. They're now the fourth favorite to win the Super Bowl with most betting sites and the third favorite in the NFC. So we'll see. We'll see. For this game, I thought, Kevin O'Connell basically locked up Coach of the Year. He was like minus 900 going into the week, but he is now an absolute lock to win Coach of the Year. The team at worst will finish 14-3 with a 6.5 win over under. So, he was a shoe-in once they got that 13th win, and now that they've got to 14 and could get to 15 and get the number one seed, it's locked in. His performance in this game, basically through the first 50 minutes, was as good as I've seen. The Packers were a trendy pick, especially among professional sports bettors coming into this week. A lot of people in sports media saying, hey, actually, the Packers are better than the Vikings. They run the ball. They play really physically. They've got a solid defensive line. They're well coached. Well, then why did the Vikings go up 28-0 on them in week 4 and then 27-10 on them in week 17 and beat them both times? The Lions also beat them both times. I think the Packers are a very good team. They might even be the third best team in the NFC, but they're clearly not as good as the Vikings. And I mean, through 120 minutes of football, the Vikings have basically dominated everything except for garbage time in those games. So incredible performance from O'Connell, who I think essentially called a perfect game. Darnold had the one bad throw in the third quarter that kind of gave the Packers some life and led to them having a bit of a comeback there. But other than that, he basically had a perfect game. 377 yards, 3 touchdowns. The throw to Addison for the touchdown in the second quarter is as good a throw as a Vikings quarterback can have. I mean, it's been since maybe, I don't know, 2001 Dante Culpepper, 2000 Dante Culpepper that I've seen a guy kind of have that mobility in the pocket, have the rocket arm, and put it, on somebody, and then. Because, I mean, the other times we've had great quarterbacks, they haven't been mobile at all, like, Brett Favre and Teddy Bridgewater, who, after his injury really couldn't move that much. Sam Bradford couldn't move. Kirk Cousins, famously statuesque. So it was really amazing to see. And then after the game, we saw Tom Brady's interview with Sam Darnold. We saw the locker room scenes. We saw the whole situation with Cam Bynum's, weekly choreographed dances with the defense. And this week it was High School Musical. It's just starting to feel like the team of destiny. I don't want the season to end. I only want it to end in a Super Bowl title. If it ends, say we lose to Detroit and then lose in round 1, it just feels like such a dud. Like, this is just such a magical team with the right coach, the right time, the right defensive coordinator. I mean, Brian Flores through 55 minutes of that game was also just incredible. And then, a couple of late touchdowns that I was thinking they were garbage time, but the Packers really did have a chance there if we didn't convert on that 3rd and 2. So, Flores has been dialing up these just extremely exotic blitzes and, having 7, 8, 9 guys on the line to start a play all the time. And I was like, okay, this is really great when we started out 5-0. But I thought teams would eventually figure it out. Jordan Love did not figure it out until 5 minutes were left in the game. He was completely lost. He's dancing around back there. I guess the game plan was that the Vikings were going to play man in this game, which they never do. They play man apparently about 11% of the time, the least in the NFL. And then in this game, they played it 45% of the time. Flores essentially told his edge rushers, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, and unfortunately, Pat Jones got injured, and it looks like he's out for the season. But he told them, more so than sacks today, just set the edge and make him step up. If you let Jordan Love roll out, he's got a cannon arm and he's going to make plays. If you keep him in the pocket and make him go back and forward, which, I mean, genius from Flores, just watching Jordan Love basically just tap the ball all game. He had no idea what he was looking at and didn't have that outlet to escape to his right-hand side and throw to his arm side. So it was like an excellent game plan from Flores. The more I watch the highlights of the game, the more I think, hey, if we did a better job of bottling up Josh Jacobs, maybe we would have won that game by like 3 touchdowns. So, I was really impressed. All around effort. The fans too. I mean, if you get the greatest of all time, Tom Brady on the call there, basically saying it's as deafening a building as he's ever been in, you're like, that's a hell of a compliment. So Vikes got to win this game, which we'll preview here in a minute, so that they can have 2 more home games to get to the Super Bowl. Quick review of the Niners for all our Niner fan listeners. I know they don't want to hear it. I know if Joey was on the pod today, he really wouldn't be thrilled to talk about the team, but it's a spirited performance by them on Monday Night Football, losing 40-35. The offense, which I don't think there was any expectation for them to put up points this week, even against the bad Detroit defense. The over-under was at like 51 points, and then it went down by game time to like 47, 46 because they were thinking, hey, San Francisco's not going to be able to muster much. They did great, 5 touchdowns. I mean, Moody couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and that's a problem for another day. But if Moody makes all his kicks, the Niners win by 1. So pretty crazy situation where they have no reason to be giving full effort on both sides. Like, the Niners season is over. The Lions, it makes literally no difference whether they won tonight or not. But both teams played everybody, gave 100% effort. It was a great football game. Guys like George Kittle looked great. Ricky Pearsall had his breakout game. That was his best game in the NFL by far. Little worrying that Purdy had 2 picks and then suffered an injury at the end of the game, and Dobbs had to come in. So we'll take a look at that when we get into the Week 18 and off-season preview for the Niners. Hopefully the Purdy injury isn't serious, but really kind of a dud way to end what was a really exciting game. But the Lions win it. The biggest story that comes out of this game is the Lions played against a team who was just completely decimated and still gave up 35 points. So that's now, what is it, 5-6 weeks in a row that the Lions defense has looked absolutely awful. So really, really encouraging for Vikings fans going into Week 18 to see that the extremely hamstrung Niners could put up 35 on them. So impressive performance from the Niners in a game where I didn't really think they were going to show that kind of effort. So good on them for putting a good effort there for the fans in their final home game of the year. Week 17's marquee games. We got some, really odd scheduling quirks in Week 17 that threw things off a little bit. You had the 2 Wednesday games, starting with the Chiefs, who locked up the number 1 seed, just dominated the Steelers. We'll get to the Steelers a little bit later in the bum of the week, but they are who we thought they were at the beginning of the season after 3 straight just demoralizing losses where they couldn't put up any offense whatsoever. They're going to be a one-and-done playoff team. The thought when they were I believe they were 9-3, that, oh, hey, maybe this is a true Super Bowl contender. That's been completely shut down. And I really think they should entertain the possibility of drafting a quarterback and not rolling it again with, Wilson, Fields, or whoever. Terrible performance from the Steelers in that game. And then for the Chiefs, they're hitting their stride at the right time. It's terrifying for everybody else in the NFL as they go for a three-peat. I've been as critical as anyone of the Chiefs this year with just their inability to put games away, and they have to win them all with these, block field goal, horrible ref call, quarterback fumbles at the last second in Aiden O'Connell. I mean, it's just like they've been getting by the skin of their teeth, not the last 2 weeks. They've finally kind of put the pedal to the metal, and then they can completely rest this week. They have the bye, so they'll get a second week off. They'll be ready for round 2, and the Chiefs are probably going to be a wagon again. I would be shocked if they didn't at least make the AFC Championship game. The Ravens finally passed up Pittsburgh. We all knew it was going to happen at some point. The Ravens are just too good. If you look at their advanced analytics, their Pro Football Focus and DVOA stats, they are the number 1 team in the NFL. Now, obviously, I think a lot of us would say, oh, Kansas City, Buffalo, Minnesota, Detroit, Philly would all be ahead of them in terms of like the eye test, but in terms of stats and just like overall performance by the team, other than their secondary, I think the Ravens are right up there with the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL. So their win was crucial. All they have to do is beat the hapless Browns led by Dorian Thompson-Robinson in week 18. And if they win that game, they'll be the 3 seed, which they're going to win it. They're favored by 18. DTR is one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen in the NFL. So I think it's all locked up there for Baltimore. Then there was the Thursday game, which is a total dud. The Seahawks won, but it wasn't enough as the Rams later on Saturday won their game and clinched the NFC West. So it looks like the Rams are locked into probably the 3 seed. It's a possibility they could fall to 4 with a combination of results. But story there for me is that the Rams barely got by just a bad Cardinals team that has completely looked lifeless the last 4 weeks. The Rams are struggling to score points. That's now 4 weeks in a row. They haven't been able to put up 20 points, including games against some really bad teams. So they're kind of sputtering heading into the playoffs, but good on Sean McVay in a year that looked like a down year for them. They're going to go at least 10-7, maybe 11-6 and host a playoff game. So good on them for getting there. The game of the week was the Bengals-Broncos game, which I don't think should have gone to overtime. I think there was a lot of clock mismanagement by both coaches. I think there was some key errors by both kickers and quarterbacks there in the fourth quarter and overtime. Great game, keeps the Bengals' slim hopes of the playoffs alive. I think in maybe 95 out of 100 seasons, Joe Burrow would win the MVP this year, but he's just on one of the all-time worst coach teams. And I mean, I've been going about since I started this podcast. I've loved to dunk on Zach Taylor. He coached his team to a Super Bowl. He's coached his team to multiple playoff appearances, including a second AFC Championship game appearance. I get it, but he's playing or he's coaching one of the greatest players of his generation in Joe Burrow, and he's being absolutely carried by him. If I were in charge in Cincinnati, at the very least, you fire Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator. I would entertain firing Zach Taylor and finding, another coach who could maybe get Burrow over the top, someone along the lines of Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, go with a younger offensive-minded head coach who, is willing to put in a defensive coordinator that's a hard ass because, man, the Bengals, I think, just, that's a team that in many, many other seasons could have gone like 13-4, 14-3 and been a 1 or 2 seed, and Burrow would have won the MVP. 42 touchdowns, 8 picks, including like 7 games in a row of essentially perfect quarterback play. So since he's still alive, Miami's still alive because of that result. So that's all to play for next week. We'll get to that in a minute with a preview. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about, the Giants. I mean, completely bungling the number 1 pick. All they had to do was lose this game, and then next week, they're playing the Colts and then the Eagles. What are you doing? I mean, Drew Lock just has the game of his life. Brian Daboll coached like it was the Super Bowl, and they go from the number 1 pick to, I believe, the number 6 pick. Basically destroys, their chance of getting any kind of value in the first round. They desperately need a quarterback. Now they're not going to get one. If they do get one with that pick, it's going to be an extreme reach. It seems like there's only 2 quarterbacks worthy of being taken in the first or second round in this draft, and now they're not going to get either of them unless they trade up and mortgage the farm. A terrible organization, makes terrible decisions, it's just that's what it is there in New York right now. Let's head to the Week 18 preview. We got to start with the Niners just because we'll get to the big game here in a minute. The Niners game, my preview is who cares? I don't think either team cares about this game. If you ask most Niner fans, they'd want a loss here so that they can get I believe they can get the 10th pick or the 11th pick with a loss. A win would mean they were somewhere in the 15-16 range. Just big picture, does Purdy play this game? It doesn't really matter. What is the product for Purdy, or the prospects for Purdy heading into next season, where, is he going to get traded? Is he going to get an extension? Personally, if I was John Lynch, I would just play it out and just be like, hey, you're going to play on the 4th year of your 4-year deal this year. And, if you play really well, we'll discuss contract extension. We'll probably franchise tag you, but we're going to push this into next season. It sounds like it's maybe 60-40 that they do give him the extension. We'll see. I mean, yet another performance today where there were a few balls that sailed. He was excellent through the first, 2.5 quarters. You're like, man, does that look like a guy who's just on a mission to get that big contract? But we'll see with Purdy. And then personally, I think for the Niners, I would play a bunch of youngsters in this game and basically give all the old heads of this game off. They gave everything they had tonight. I would tell Warner, Kittle, Bosa, Debo, every one of those guys, hey, thanks for your contributions this season and still give an effort after we were eliminated. Let's sit this one out. The team needs to get younger next year anyway. I think a full retool is probably coming. I think they'll keep some of those guys like Warner, but I think, hard decisions are going to have to be made in the offseason. Not just at quarterback, but at all the positions. So got to figure out McCaffrey's health as well. It's a crazy situation for the Niners coming off of a Super Bowl appearance, an NFC Championship appearance. Now they're like, hey, what do we do going forward? Like, what's our identity? So that's the final game of the season at Arizona. For the Vikings, I mean, there has been talk on social media and on the Fox and ESPN shows that this is the biggest regular season game of all time. I agree. It's the most combined wins between two teams in a game all time. The previous record was 26. This will have 28. You got a 14-2 team against a 14-2 team. The winner gets the number 1 seed in the NFC. I personally think the winner of this game is going to the Super Bowl, and the loser of this game might lose in round 1, likely to lose in either round 1 or round 2. It's that big of a difference. Like, if you have to win 2 home games to go to the Super Bowl versus 3 road games to get to the Super Bowl, I mean, you're talking somewhere in the line of like plus 210, plus 220 to like 10-1. So you're going from 35 to 50% chance of making the Super Bowl to less than 10%. That's how much this game matters. You're going to have a 14-3 wild card team, which is just bonkers, just absolutely nuts. That'll be the most wins ever for a wild card team, regardless of who it is. This game, to me, especially after watching tonight's game, it all boils down to, can the Vikings pass rush get past the Lions' unbelievable offensive line? I would say the Vikings are probably the second or third best pass rush in the NFL, and the Lions are clearly the best offensive line in the NFL. If, say, Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner combine for like 2 or 3 sacks, the Vikings get a couple turnovers, maybe a strip sack, something like that, they're going to win the game. If you look back at the box score at the end of the game and they have 1 sack or no sacks, and Goff has no turnovers, then the Lions are going to win the game. I think the Lions are going to give up points regardless. I would be shocked if the Vikings scored less than maybe 28, 30 points in this game. I think it's going to be one of those where it's like, I don't know, 28, 25, something like that. It's going to be a high-scoring game. The big key to me that I'll look for in the first quarter is basically Darnold has come out every game, just balls out the entire season, which is why I think his teammates love him so much, why Vikings fans have warmed to him so much, and why Kevin O'Connell is willing to call aggressive plays so often, is that it's a bootleg, it's a multiple route concept, whatever it is. He's going to usually take either number 1, the open receiver, or number 2, the aggressive play. Like, he's not Vikings fans are used to Kirk Cousins and Sam Bradford, that type of quarterback where it's just like, there's a guy open. He's 1 yard from the line of scrimmage, but he's open. I'll get him the ball. That's not Sam Darnold. Like we saw it with the pick. There is some risk in his throws. He's got 35 touchdowns and 11 picks. I mean, he should be in the MVP conversation. I think he'll finish like 4th or 5th. But there's going to be risk, and he's going to have to take some early in this game. I mean, it's obvious with the Lions that their weakness is they can't get to the quarterback and they can't cover on the back end. They can stop the run a little bit, as we saw today with the Niners. Like Garendo was busting off big runs at the beginning of the game, but by the end, the Niners didn't even bother running the ball. They just can't cover anybody and can't rush the passer. So it's going to be a similar game to the Packer game where it's just Sammy D, just run it and gun it. He threw for 377 last game. He might have to throw for more in this one. If I'm a Lions fan coming into this game, I texted kind of the only Lions fan friend that I know, one of my coworkers, and he was basically like, how is this happening? Like, this is by far the greatest season in Lions history in terms of regular season. And yet here are the Vikings with a supposed rebuild season, and they're 14-2 heading into week 18. It's really unbelievable. And I think, if you're a Lions fan and you're coming into this game, you're thinking, how did it even get to this point? I mean, this is our best team ever. We run the ball like nobody's business. Our quarterback is really efficient with the ball. We have all these weapons in Laporta and St. Brown and Montgomery when healthy, and Jameson Williams just had an amazing game. He seems to come up big in big moments. How is it even coming to this? Well, the fact is we're here. And I think, the Lions, obviously they run on emotion, probably even more than the Vikings, especially, they take on the personality of their head coach. And I think Dan Campbell will have the boys ready for this one. Yes, they're injured. Yes, their defense is just an absolute shell of itself. But man, this is going to be a high scoring game. It's going to be a lot of fun. You'll probably know 5 to 8 minutes into the first quarter whether this is going to be exactly what we think, like a shootout, or whether, maybe one set of players is feeling the nerves a little bit. So we'll find out early in this one. I'll probably know, pretty soon after the opening kickoff whether I feel comfortable with Sam Darnold in what is essentially a playoff game, because I've felt so comfortable with him all year. He's been unbelievable. There's been a few mistakes. He had a bad game against the Jets. He had a pretty bad game against the Rams. Other than that, he's been perfect. So we'll see. We'll see how that one turns out. The conversation around it being the biggest game in NFL regular season history, I completely agree with it, not just because of the combined wins, but the difference between the 1 seed and the 5 seed is gigantic. The NFC, in my opinion, is just kind of a tire fire right now. Like, you look around at each team and there's just a gigantic glaring hole on every one of them, even though all of them have 11 plus wins except for the NFC South winner. You look around the league or around the conference and you go, okay, Vikings, pass defense, very suspect. Lions, pass defense, incredibly suspect with a lot of injuries. Eagles, quarterback is not playing because he has a concussion. Major locker room issues despite being 13-3. You look at Washington. I think that defense is not good at all. I think they have just this electric rookie quarterback and an unbelievable wide receiver in Terry McLaurin. But it's a bad defense, just flat out. You look at the Rams, I would say they don't have much talent on defense, and they haven't scored more than 20 points in 5 weeks. Like, that's a problem. And then obviously, the Bucks, they're scoring points in bunches, but their defense isn't very good other than Vita Vea and Levante David. The supporting cast there is pretty bad. They're going to get scored on. And then, I mean, Atlanta, if they squeak in, they're really not a threat at all. The Packers are kind of sneakily just right there. Yes, they've lost all 4 games against the Vikings and Lions, but they're, as we saw last year when they snuck in as the 7th seed and then beat Dallas on the road in round 1. Very nearly won against the Niners in San Francisco in round 2. They're going to be a sneaky team. So the winner of this game only has to win 2 home games between the Vikings and Lions. So it's like, whoever wins that game, you really have the inside track, because all of these other NFC teams have flaws. It's not like the AFC where you got the Chiefs are a juggernaut, the Ravens are a juggernaut, the Bills are a wagon, especially if Josh Allen is just healthy and cooking. Like, in the NFC, I mean, it's a hodgepodge. You want to get that 1 seed because it's like, hey, then we get to separate ourselves from the pack. We usually take a look at marquee games for next week at this point. Because of the way things have broken out, really the only things left to be decided are the NFC South winner, which Tampa Bay is going to win their game, so Tampa Bay is going to win the South. The AFC North winner, which Baltimore is going to crush Cleveland. They're going to win that division. So I guess there's a little bit of intrigue in Cincinnati at Pittsburgh and then Kansas City at Denver. If Denver wins, they're in. If Denver loses against Kansas City backups, then either Cincy or Miami will be in. Other than the Vikings-Lions game, it is a Week 18 dud. I think when Baltimore wins, maybe Pittsburgh completely calls off the Dogs for their game and Cincinnati gets to just roll in that one. I will tell you when we get to my picks later, I do see some motivation edges here for teams based on seeding. Obviously, there's motivation edge if you're trying to make a playoff spot or trying to get a bye, but there's actually motivation edge in seeding, especially in the AFC. Everybody wants to play Houston. Nobody wants to play Baltimore. Like, Houston is just leaking oil at a level that I just can't believe. Every time I watch them play, it's just lethargic on another level. So I think playing for that 5 seed is really important in the AFC. Joey's out this week. I'll take over the Jack and the Bum of the Week for him. I'll give you my candidates and then my winner. Mike Tomlin's on there just because this is what we see almost every year from Pittsburgh. Like, there's no offense. Yes, it's a good defense. Yes, it's a well-coached team. For whatever reason, Mike Tomlin just can't coach teams that can score points anymore. We saw it in the last 3 games, especially this one against Kansas City last week. They basically have no hope other than a Russell Wilson moonball landed in the arms of somebody. Like, it's not a good offense right now. They're going to get bounced early in the playoffs. Maybe if they can find a way to beat Cincinnati, they can then beat Houston, but they're not going anywhere with this just anemic offense. So Mike Tomlin, who we were ready to give him Coach of the Year 5 weeks ago, predictably, the team is sputtering to the finish. Jerod Mayo has to be on here. Bizarre pregame situation where he said to the press that they're going to start Antonio Gibson at running back because of Ramondre Stevenson's fumbling issues. Then the game starts and Ramondre Stevenson is out there to start the game. And everybody's like, didn't he just say he was benching him because of his fumbling issues? And then after the game, I mean, just an absolute onslaught from the Boston media on his lack of preparation, on his just absolutely confounding quotes that he ends up just essentially lying to the press. His team is just woefully unprepared. They lost 40-7 to the Chargers. I just think he's a one and done. He's been an absolute disaster there. He's doing a great job in getting them the number 1 pick, but he's clearly not NFL head coach material. Shane Steichen's going to be on there. He's sneakily a coach that could be fired. I think Indianapolis obviously has a bad situation at quarterback with Richardson just not being able to hit the broadside of a barn, and then Flacco's 40 years old. It's just not a good situation. I get it. But man, poorly coached team with poor effort in that game against the Giants. All you have to do is beat the Giants in that game, and then you have the inside track if Denver loses to make the playoffs. They couldn't even beat the worst team in the NFL as 7.5-point favorites. Poor coaching performance from Shane Steichen, and his team is just so sloppy every week. But the winner for Jack and the Bum of the Week is going to be Falcons head coach Raheem Morris. I have been watching football for 30 years. I don't know if I've ever seen worse clock management from a head coach than I saw in Sunday Night Football last night. I get it. You got a rookie quarterback and you don't want to put too much on his plate. But at the end of the first half and the second half, just utter mismanagement on a level that I can't even understand. Why is there not someone on the sideline telling him the basics of, like, dude, have you ever played Madden? Like, you need to call timeout here. Or, dude, have you ever played Madden? Don't call timeout here. Like, it's just every possible decision that he made during that game in terms of timeout management, in terms of telling his quarterback to spike it or call a timeout, or, calling a run play or calling a pass. I mean, he screwed it all up royally. And you can't blame any of that on the rookie quarterback, because I thought Penix was fine. Really just horrible performance from Raheem Morris. They went from, after that win against Tampa Bay, where Cousins threw for 500 yards, looking like Raheem Morris might win Coach of the Year. They could go like 12-5, 11-6, and have a shot in the playoffs too. He's not going to be a one and done, but I mean, man, just the city of Atlanta has definitely soured on him after 4 or 5 just horrible weeks from them, and then benching their $100 million quarterback. So kind of a tire fire situation there in Atlanta, mostly due to poor in-game management by Raheem Morris. He's the jack in the bum of the week for week 17 in the NFL. Let's go to the You Like That picks of the week. We're now 46, 35, and 4 on the season. Unfortunately, we went 1-4 last week. That was the first time we've had a bad week since week 5. Obviously, we got there with Kansas City, and then after that, it was just a kind of a disaster. We got positive line movement on a lot of our picks. We took Cleveland at +7. That closed at 2.5. We took Atlanta at +4.5. That closed at 3.5. So I'm feeling good, especially the Atlanta game. They somehow give up a touchdown in overtime. That one doesn't cover. Cleveland, I mean, I thought maybe Tua would miss the game. When he did, I was like, fantastic, we're going to win that bet. Now they're completely lifeless. They're trying to lose for a better pick. And then the Denver one, I don't know how we lost that bet either. So bad luck. We'll get back on the horse here. I got 5 picks for you to end the regular season. We'll go with Cincinnati -1.5. The schedule gods, I mean, they're smiling on them. Baltimore's going to win in the early game on Saturday. At that point, I think it's likely that Pittsburgh calls off the dogs, and they may not like bench Wilson or TJ Watt or anything, but they might in the second half, if they're trailing, just start pulling everybody. I like Cincy -1.5 at Pittsburgh. I think they'll give full effort trying to get that last playoff spot, and Pittsburgh might call off the dogs. Buffalo -1.5. Nobody's going to want to pick them with, whoever starts a quarterback this week. Is it Mitch Trubisky? I don't even know who their backup is, but their 2s are so much better than the Pats 1s. Like Jerod Mayo, his assignment in this game is to lose. Like lose, get fired, collect whatever $15-20 million in compensation, and go coach somebody's linebackers or defensive, be a defensive coordinator somewhere. Like it's not working in New England. They're going to hire someone like Mike Vrabel. Clearly the fix is in. I mean, I would be shocked if the Crafts didn't essentially put down some sort of a memo to the coaching staff to maybe not play Drake May this week, say he has a concussion, maybe not play some of your best players, just do everything we can to get this loss so we can get the number 1 pick and get a king's ransom for it when they trade it. So I think Buffalo's going to win that game, playing their 2s. I think New England's going to roll over. Miami -1.5 at the Jets. Jets might start Tyrod Taylor. The Jets are just, I mean, they've thrown the towel months ago. I mean, I would say weeks ago, but they were essentially eliminated 7-8 weeks ago. And Miami's still in this. I mean, Tua could play this game. They're saying his hip injury is likely not a season ender, so it's like maybe he could play this week. Whether he plays or not, the Jets are going to give no effort, and Miami still has a chance to make the playoffs. So they'll be looking up at the scoreboard to see if Denver's winning, but at least for the first half of this game, they're going to give full effort, so I like Miami there. The Rams won. They're +3 at home against the Seahawks. The thought here is that they're going to bench Stafford, at least for some of the game, bench Nakua, Kupp, all these guys. I don't think so. I think you want to be the 3. If they lose and Tampa wins, Tampa becomes the 3 seed and the Rams fall to 4. The 3 seed has a better chance at having a second home game, especially with that 2-7 matchup being Eagles-Packers. I really think the Packers could, if not should, win that game, which would mean that the Rams would get a second home playoff game if they're the 3 seed. So I think they're going to play everybody. Maybe if someone gets dinged up, they pull them, but I think they're going to give full effort here. I like the Rams +3 at home against the Seahawks. And then Vikings. I want to pick us. I'm going to pick the over. I'm going to go over 52. I think it's just going to be one of those games that it could be 24-21 at the half. Both teams struggle to stop the pass. Both teams throw the ball like nobody's business. I think Aaron Glenn is a really bad defensive coordinator, and the Lions are just a really bad defense. They're giving up, 37 a game the last 4 weeks. Vikings are going to put up points. The Lions are too good to not put up points, even against the Vikings' great Brian Flores defense. I think this one finishes, like I said earlier in the pod, somewhere in that 31-28, 28-27, something like that, and goes over. So I'll take the Vikings Detroit over 52. There's the You Like That picks of the week for week 18 in the NFL. Cincinnati -1.5 at Pittsburgh, Buffalo -1.5 at New England, Miami -1.5 at the Jets, the Rams +3 at home against the Seahawks, and then the Vikings Lions over 52. Joey's Feels Great Baby take. He didn't submit one prior to the buzzer. I'm just going to say that my take is that I think the winner of the Vikings Lions game will not only make the Super Bowl, but win the Super Bowl. That's, it's not like an explosive take like Joey has a lot of the time. I just think whoever the 1 seed in the NFC is going to get to play someone not so great in their first playoff matchup. Tampa, I guess it could be like Washington, conceivably. So it's like, I love that first round matchup for whoever. And then in the championship game, whether it's the Eagles, whether it's one of the other teams, like if say it's the Vikings or Lions, hosting each other again in the conference championship, whoever has the home field advantage in the NFC is clearly, I think, going to make the Super Bowl. And I just think it's like the Vikings and Lions are the teams of destiny this year. Like whoever comes out of this game probably plays whoever, the Chiefs, Bills, Baltimore in the Super Bowl. I just think it's their year. So my hot take will be the winner of the Vikings-Lions game will win the Super Bowl this year. And then we're going to close the pod a little early here. When I do the solo pod, I feel like I'm just rambling on and on. So we'll close it a little early. There was a major breakthrough in the whole A's saga this week that I just want to cover. So for those of you who aren't in the top 0.001% of, A's followers like me, essentially construction has started at the Sacramento ballpark, the Giants AAA ballpark, to make it major league ready for the year. That's the extent of the progress made towards this relocation. No shovels in the ground, no date for shovels in the ground in Las Vegas, no confirmation of funding. There was some sort of a Goldman Sachs letter saying that, yes, the Fisher family has enough money to fund this ballpark. There was no mention of whether they are going to do it or not. Fisher is still meeting with every investor he can possibly meet with in an attempt to sell them, a portion of the team so that he can fund the construction of this ballpark with those proceeds. Nobody's biting, and for good reason. It's a terrible investment. Baseball in the desert, small stadium, team that just never spends on its players, small fan base. It's a Dodger town already. It's a terrible investment, so nobody's buying. The biggest break in this situation in months, if not years, Dave Kaval resigned, which was a shock. I mean, it's clear that his pivot in 2021 to being the heel for John Fisher and doing everything in his power to move the A's to Las Vegas and alienate and destroy the Oakland fan base, it was all for naught. Like, he essentially was told by John Fisher, you failed, you're out. And his one of his minority owners, Sandy Dean, is now taking over as the A's president. To me, that's a guy being scapegoated by Fisher, and I think Kaval would say, that he's just fleeing a sinking ship. I really do think this is all going to fall apart at some point here in the next 3 months. If you're an A's fan who has any kind of hope of them staying in the Bay Area, there was a meeting reportedly in late September between Joe Lacob and his team and John Fisher and his team. An offer somewhere in the 1.5 to 2 billion range was apparently discussed. There was also a smaller cash option that was discussed where John Fisher would get a small minority stake in the Warriors, which the Warriors are now worth over $4 billion. So obviously that's, even though it's a small stake in the team, it's a much more valuable team than the A's, obviously. Apparently Fisher said no. He believed that Kaval and his, cohorts could get this done. Well, they haven't. And we're in January 2025 at this point. Yes, the A's are going to play in Sacramento in 2025. There's supposedly, a few ways that this could break down according to all the experts in this space. Number one, and I think it's the most likely, is that Fisher sells to Vivek Ranadive and he builds in Sacramento. Just because of their personal relationship, he's giving him 4 years to play at his Sacramento ballpark for free. I think if Fisher eventually decides, hey, this is over, I can't get this done, he would sell it to a friend rather than admitting defeat. I think the second most likely option is he sells to a Las Vegas-based developer who then pushes that over the line because they're actually willing to spend money. And then the third most likely would be he sells to Joe Lacob, and Joe Lacob keeps the team in the Bay Area. We'll see how this all, breaks down. But my point in all this is, with Kaval fleeing the sinking ship, the fourth most likely option here, which I think in most people's mind is the most likely, is that Fisher keeps the team and they move to Las Vegas. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's less than a 5% chance of happening. If you follow any of the local Las Vegas media, other than the ones bought and paid for by the A's, Las Vegas Review-Journal and Mick Akers, who are basically on the A's payroll, Nevada Independent, the Vital Vegas people, they all have said the talk throughout the town is anything A's related is off the table for investors. Like, it's a project that no one wants to be involved in. The only company that's partnered with the A's on this is Bally's, and they're basically on the verge of bankruptcy. The Vital Vegas account is so funny on Twitter. They basically just say the Tropicana is going to be a parking lot for all the other casinos. It's not going to be a baseball stadium. Like, when people just try to dunk on them in the comments, they're just like, when I see shovels in the ground, I'll send you money. Sure. Give me any odds, I will bet against it. And I'm like, okay. It's clear the people in Las Vegas that know the power brokers have already, seen that this project is just not going to happen under Fisher's ownership. So good riddance to Dave Kaval. Your mission of destroying baseball in the East Bay appeared to be a success. But the fact that you're resigning now shows that, hey, maybe, being such an asshole for so many years to so many people takes a toll. So good riddance, Dave. Thanks for ripping baseball out of Oakland. Let's close the pod on a more positive note. So excited for the Vikings game. Biggest regular season game in Vikings history, maybe in NFL history. It's something that at the beginning of the season I didn't think was possible, and this is even before McCarthy's injury. I thought our ceiling was maybe 9-8, 10-7, and making the playoffs as a 6 or 5 seed. That's what I thought the ceiling was. We now have a chance to be 15-2, to be the 1 seed, to be the NFC favorite to make the Super Bowl, to win our first title, in 59 years. Can't believe it that we're even talking about this. So thanks to everybody who listens week in, week out. Hopefully we can get the Vikings over the line and have a stress-free wild card round as we wait to find out who we play in round 2. But even if they lose this game, I mean, what a season. Still going to make the playoffs, still going to be favored in round 1. So proud of this team, so proud of the coach, the defensive coordinator, Sam Darnold for resurrecting his career, Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, Jones, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Gilmore, all these guys. Just an unbelievable, job by Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah bringing all these guys in, by O'Connell just having, the culture of all cultures in Minnesota, a group that wants to play for each other. So really excited about how this Viking season's gone. We'll see if they get it over the line, get that number 1 seed. We'll be back. Joey will be back for our round 1 wild card preview, and that'll drop next Monday. We'll see you guys then. Thanks for listening.